Jayla Blakemore and myself will be kind of chatting through these different things. For those that I haven't had the pleasure of interacting with, my name's Jesse Lineberry. I'm a CFP that has worked in a couple of RIAs, have been here at New Planner Recruiting for about 3 years in the recruiter seat. I'm also an adjunct instructor in Virginia Tech CFP program, and really passionate about all things financial planning. Jayla?
Sure, and I am Jayla Blakemore. I am a graduate of the University of Georgia's Financial Planning Program. I'm repping on the shirt today, if you can see. And like Jesse said, passionate about all things financial planning. I've been with New Planner Recruiting for about a year, and just excited to share more about our story and what we do with you all.
There's no inter-office sports rivalries, as you all can imagine. So anyhow, let's get started. So a couple of things before we kick off into the material. So if you're a candidate here today, connect with Jayla, Alyssa, and myself on LinkedIn. Go ahead and do that now. This is one time you hear someone leading a conversation that's telling you to actually get on your device and do something. So take advantage of that. Go ahead and connect with us on LinkedIn, right? You never know when we're going to have something that would be a good fit for you, even if you've already got a job, right? And it helps to be connected on LinkedIn. You can see when we do things like this in the future. That would be awesome. Also, we have a blog and a podcast. So check out the blog, which is on our website. You can go to newplannerrecruiting.com and read our blog. We have a candidate blog, which is targeted mostly to you all, but we also have a client blog, which is targeted to firm owners. That can be interesting for you as a candidate as well, because you know what sorts of topics firm owners are thinking about and engaging with. The podcast is also a great resource where you can hear from financial planners that we've perhaps placed or found success early in their career, where they talk about various trends within the profession and their experience. And that can be a value too. Go check out both of those things. We also have a YouTube channel. So we're expanding within that social media space. So check us out on all of those forums. Jayla, do you want to kick off kind of the State of the Union?
Sure. So we wanted to share with you all a little bit about what we're seeing and trends that we're noticing and kind of the state of where we are in the job market. And if you haven't heard the conversation or already engaged in the conversation of the job market being so crazy, now's the time. We're here to kind of talk about that a little bit. So we understand the different circumstances that we're within, being in a pandemic, as well as the shift to the virtual environment and then the kind of shift back to the regular environment, but we're kind of in between. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to make it make sense. So there's a lot of question marks that come up there. We're also seeing a lot of trends where people are entering the financial planning profession. This is a great time to be a career changer, a great time to decide that financial planning is what you want to do. It's a really great profession for a lot of different reasons that I know Jesse and myself can go on and on and on about. But if you're wondering kind of where your passion is, hopefully that's something that we can kind of help point you toward along this conversation as you're understanding what we see as recruiters, what financial planning firms have to offer, and then what you can be looking for yourself for your own personal goals. But just kind of a 3,000 foot overview of what we're seeing on a day-to-day. We're talking to a good amount of candidates who are in the job market and looking. I think increasingly so, we're seeing that candidates are looking in a lot more places because so many places are hiring. In terms of New Planner Recruiting specifically, we have some markets that we work pretty often geographically. So if you're ever looking on our website, it's not that we don't love all of the 50 states and all the regions and places, but there are some markets where, you know, there are a lot of financial planning firms, or there are several CFP programs, or different reasons as to why there may be a focus of financial planning in the area. The New York, New Jersey area up in the Northeast is a hot spot for us right now and kind of ongoing. Same thing with the DC, DMV area, Maryland, Virginia, and there is also an area that we've been working heavily in. Also coming down into the Mid-Atlantic, into basically every major city in North Carolina is somewhere that we've been working on this year, as well as moving into the Southeast, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama are a lot of places that we're focused in. The New Planner Recruiter team itself, 3 of our team members are based in Georgia. That for whatever reason that hasn't brought a skew to Georgia jobs, but we also have a couple of Atlanta area jobs that'll be coming aboard. So if you're also from Georgia or the Atlanta area, you can look forward to that. Texas as a whole is also a place that we work pretty heavily in. Dallas and Houston are markets that we're pretty familiar with, as well as many cities in the Midwest, Denver, Kansas City, and then moving out to the West Coast, we've had several jobs in San Diego and San Francisco and in those areas, as well as Seattle currently. So just kind of giving you kind of a heat map of what we're seeing, places that we're working on now, and kind of how they divvy up. So Jesse and I work both collaboratively as well as separately. So if you're ever looking at opportunities on our page and you see one person's information or the other, that's just the person who kind of manages the relationship. But we're happy to kind of connect you with one of the other if there's opportunities that you're looking for specifically with us. And then just talking a little bit more about the remote, the hybrid. That's a conversation that we've been having a lot with candidates as well. They've realized, I can do a lot of my work from home. I would like to continue that hybrid flexibility. For those of us who live in super major cities with terrible traffic like myself, avoiding going into the office is definitely something. And it's not that we're avoiding going into the office, but looking for alternatives to going into the office if there is that flexibility is definitely a conversation that we've been having. Increasingly so. It's also a conversation that we've been having pretty heavily with our clients as well, as they kind of look at what that rebuild, what that ramp up period looks like to get everybody back into the office or back to whatever that new normal is going to be. So that's a pretty normal conversation. And if you're wondering or wanting to get more perspective on what that is, we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later, but just want to know that that's a conversation that a lot of firms are having, as well as a lot of candidates that we talk to, and even ourselves as a firm, just talking about what that looks like. Are we ever going to be fully, completely in person again? Or, what are we going to be able to compromise on that's a good middle ground for the candidates, the clients, and the clients that we're going to be serving in the financial planning industry too. So that's a little bit of an overview of kind of what we're seeing, some of the things that we may tackle and talk about. We want to encourage you, if you have questions, definitely drop those in the chat. Like if we spur different ideas, or if you've been holding on to questions that you've been wondering, there's no bad question, there's no wrong question, and we have to kind of dive into that. But Jesse and I have kind of worked up some questions, some common questions, and some questions that you guys submitted before to start to answer through to give you some things to think about, and then we'll continue on from there.
Perfect. Well, thanks for sharing that, Jayla. So let's go ahead and segue straight into the virtual piece, because I have a feeling that's a question that we're going to get quite often in the chat box, and it's one we've gotten in the past quite a bit. So as COVID has kind of resided and then kind of came back, right? And now hopefully we're on the back end of the Delta variant. Whatever that looks like, we're starting to get more and more questions about, our firm's going to require folks to come back into the office. If I'm a senior at a financial planning program, do I need to be prepared to go into the office, or will I be working virtually? Should I have a preference, right? We're getting various iterations of that. What Jayla and I are seeing mostly are firms thinking about some sort of hybrid policy, right? Where they're going to have 3, maybe 4 days where they expect folks to be in the office, and then maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 days where folks work from home. Now that might be earned. That might only come after a promotion to an advisor position. It may only happen for the ops team. Now, there's a wide spectrum within this, right? We work with firms that are still 100% virtual, or we are working with a large firm in North Carolina that still doesn't have anyone in the office. They haven't had anyone in the office since March of 2020, and they don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. But we've also worked with firms that have been back in the office since July of 2020, right? And most of the folks there are going to be sticking around, and more than likely, if you go to work for that firm, then you are going to be in office as well. It brings up a question, which one is best for me? And I think you have to ask yourself some honest questions, one about location, one about how you learn, how you engage, and where you want your career to go, right? There may well be a slower ramp up period for new college grads, right? Those of you that are coming out of CFP programs, if you step into a virtual environment, if the firm doesn't have a robust remote training or virtual training process, right? Many small RIAs only hire once every other year, once every 3 years, once every 5 years to begin with. And if you step into a virtual role, you very well may be the first person they've ever trained virtually. You need to go in understanding that. Now, before the pandemic even occurred, we worked with firms that were 100% virtual, right? And those firms did have robust training schedules. New Planner Recruiting has been remote since its inception. And I think Jayla could probably speak to a greater degree about what it's like to graduate from a CFP program and be trained virtually. But that is something that some firms have, and you just need to be cognizant of that as you're exploring these opportunities. There are many advantages and disadvantages to both being in the office and being at home. If you've done something like StrengthsFinder, Colby, DISC, those things might tell you a little bit about how you're going to work best. And I think working with mentors, whether it's your CFP program director, someone from an internship, just a regular mentor that's in your life, whether it's professional or personal, might be able to give you some insight on whether or not that's right for you. Jayla, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about your experience being onboarded virtually?
Sure. So like I mentioned before, I graduated from the University of Georgia's financial planning program, and I knew relatively early into my senior year that I wasn't necessarily looking to come out into a traditional financial planner advisor type of role. So my job search already looked a little bit different. And then as I kind of found the opportunity with New Planner Recruiting, I actually had Caleb Brown as a professor. And as I found the opportunity with New Planner Recruiting and kind of realized what that entailed, I did start my journey at a time where most people were still at home. So it was the normal, like, we're at home, we're virtual, that's the training that we're going to have. So I kind of had that expectation. But it's definitely been interesting to see how that's played out over the course of time as it's continued to be the workplace that we're in. Our operation is completely remote, and it's something that's most challenging, but also rewarding and offers a good amount of flexibility. And also in the industry that we work in, where we're talking to people a lot of the time, we're talking to clients a lot of the time, it allows us to also be flexible with that too, because we obviously work with clients all over the country. So we can't be in all of the 50 states as we would want to be. So it also helps us and gives us that advantage. And that's an advantage that a lot of our clients are seeing as well, is that they can work with, clients all over the country, or they can engage with advisors all over the country. And it really adds, I guess, a level of robustness, as Jesse mentioned, to the way that you can choose to hire, and the way that, you can continue to build your team out in the future if you don't have the kind of geographic guidelines. But speaking to remote work in general, it's definitely something that requires a good amount of discipline, but it's something, like Jesse said, that if you know kind of what you need and what you require, that you're able to kind of work within that. People ask me all the time, like, oh, you don't get lonely at home, or you don't get bored, or whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm slacking Jesse different stuff about, just keeping it interesting. And we have different ways as a team that we kind of stay connected with each other. And that's something that I definitely think you should look for in different opportunities, is not only, okay, they have the remote opportunity, I don't have to come into the office, but in what ways are they trying to engage the people that are not coming into the office, if they do have people coming into the office, or just engaging the team as a whole if they're operating completely remotely. I think that those are definitely things to hone into more so than just a virtual opportunity.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Does anyone have any questions about the virtual piece? Please feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat. We're happy to stop. We want this to be collaborative and relatively informal, right? There's questions that you can ask in a professional environment and questions that you can. And we do want to open the door if there are questions that you have to go ahead and drop those in the Slack. So kind of transitioning on, right? Jayla, talk a little bit about being a senior or a recent college grad, and kind of what that market looks like and what folks should be thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. So if you're a senior now and you're graduating in December, you're graduating in May or next summer, you're probably like, okay, I'm ready to get a job. I need to start applying. And what does that process look like? I think the first step to job application is, one, having a good understanding of what it is that you're looking for. I know a lot of times you're like, oh, I'll just apply to 100,000 jobs and hopefully one of them sticks, and I'll apply to jobs in different sectors and avenues. And then you don't really have like a passion or a purpose. So I think honing in on what that passion or purpose is, what those jobs look like. And then from there, just timing. So we see, or it kind of works in cycles that are synonymous a little bit with the school year. So we have a ramp up period around this time for people that may be graduating in December, or people that may be starting with the January 1st start date, whether they're new college grads or more experienced advisors. Same thing ramping up for the summer. So as people get ready to graduate, and for the May graduates or people who may have summer start dates, we see a bit of an influx there as well. In terms of timing for you and application process, one thing that I ran into when I was applying for jobs is I was one of those, okay, I have to find a job before graduation, so let me start on August 1st as soon as classes start, but I actually wasn't graduating until the end of the summer. So what I ran into is some of the smaller firms that I was talking with, and some of the jobs that aren't projecting their retirement, financial planning is all in my brain, they're hiring that far in advance, that they just weren't ready to hire at that time. So they were like, oh yeah, we would love to have a conversation, but we want someone to start in November, or we want someone to start in March. And I was obviously still enrolled in classes. So that's something to think about as well, is that sometimes they may just not be ready to hire yet at that time, or the timing is a little bit off. That's something that we also talk about with our firm owners. And they're like, yeah, we want a new college grad. We want a really strong new college grad, like the top of the class. And then we're going to start the search in July. And most of the top new college grads probably are like those people that I mentioned, like myself, that started looking for the jobs in August, September, October, and may already have jobs. So for those of you that are like, oh yeah, I know I need a job, maybe I haven't thought about what that's going to look like or what the timing of that may be, I would definitely start to just kind of get an idea now based on what your actual graduation date is. If you're graduating in December, this is a great time to ramp up and place some emphasis on your job search. If you're going to be graduating in May, you know, I think that beginning in the new year, getting that understanding and starting to ramp up your job search then would be an appropriate time frame. And there's never a such thing as too early, but your ramp up period may be a little bit longer. And in that time where you're trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to start interviewing maybe in 3 or 4 months, what things can I be doing to prepare? That's the time where you tweak your resume, where you make time to go to the Career Center and get them to review it, maybe have a mock interview or a few with you, talk with your CFP program director or whoever you can get connected with, just to kind of preface and set up the job search to be as successful as possible, and so that you can go into it as informed as possible as well. So those are a few things to kind of think about in terms of getting prepared and ready for the application process whenever that time may come. And then in terms of roles and things that you may be looking for, we get a lot of questions about what title should I be looking for? How should I be searching the jobs and opportunities that I'm looking for as a new college graduate or as an entry-level financial planner? And there, to say that there are a few would be just a vast understatement, because there's so many different ways to name the different positions. And within the RIA space, because they're also different, they a lot of times have different variations of names too. So I think that there are tons of resources that can point you in the direction of that. But generally speaking, if you're looking at our opportunities, just to preface those, a lot of our more entry-level opportunities are titled along the lines of paraplanner, financial planning associate, financial planning analyst, financial planning strategist. Some associate advisors are in that 0 to 2 range as well. But some combination of those phrasings and wordings are what you're probably going to be looking for. And then also too, just as the next step for preparing for the application process, just making sure that you're involved, even past having connections with the people who are going to help you, even your peers and other students, the Financial Planning Association within your program, if you have one, as well as VITA in the spring that I know a lot of programs do, are things that you can kind of take advantage of as you're getting ready to start that application process.
Excellent, excellent. So we got a question. What kind of software do you guys usually use when working virtually? So let's tackle that. So for us internally as a recruiting firm, it's going to be a little bit different. We'll talk about some generalities here. So we use Slack for internal communication, which is kind of like a chat box. It's very similar to, most of you are too young to remember instant messaging and chat rooms back from the 90s, but that's kind of what it works like, except it's much more professional. We use correct grammar in those, right? So that's going to be one of the main things we use. We use the Google Suite to share documents internally. We also use a CRM very similar to what you would use in a financial planning firm. Now, some other things that you might want to get familiar with. Loom. Loom is a recording software where you can record your screen, right? And so it's often used for training, right? So if I'm not sitting over your shoulder telling you how to do something, I might record a Loom video demonstrating how to do it and then send it to you, right? And then you can kind of watch me do it, take some notes, and then hopefully you're trained on doing that, right? So think more like Khan Academy, right? As opposed to being in class learning from a professor. That's something that we're going to see a lot of. Within financial planning firms, they're depending on the type of firm and how they're regulated, might impact what communication devices can be used internally. That's something to keep in mind. But generally, the software suite might look similar, right? So probably the MS suite, right? The Microsoft Office tools, they'll use a CRM such as Redtail. Salesforce is another popular one. The Salenica overlay on Salesforce is something that we're seeing fit right now. Generally, some sort of performance reporting software like Tamarack, Orion, Black Diamond is going to be popular, along with their trading suite, especially with Orion or Tamarack, and then a financial planning software such as MoneyGuide Pro, eMoney, Right Capital, Navaplan. Those are the ones that we see often within the profession right now. So, and I would tell you, if you're struggling right now to find something, if you're a career changer and you want to get exposure, try to get exposure to any of those softwares that we just listed. It's something you can put on your resume relatively inexpensively. So some things to think about. Any other questions before we move on? Excellent. So let's talk about compensation. This is a question that we get often, right? Everyone wants to know, what am I going to get paid as a new financial planner? So we have started a salary survey that we're sharing quarterly, where we kind of compile some data that we're getting from our interviews and our placement data, and we're publishing that. So you can see our last salary survey on our website. You can go to the website and see that. Salaries are certainly ticking up within the profession, right? The degree to which depends on geography, right? If you think about the high cost of living areas, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., New York City, those tend to be moving up quicker. However, I would say across the board, it's moving up. So the general rule of thumb for a new college grad has been 40 to 60,000, depending on location. I think Jayla can speak to this as well. We're seeing that tend more towards probably 48 to 62. Would you agree with that, Jayla, depending on location?
I would.
Seeing a lot more kind of in that 50, 55, 60 range. And if you get up into New York City, DC, or San Francisco, perhaps even above that, especially for a top student coming out of a CFP program. Now, that does not mean that's what you should go tell your boss. Or that's what you should tell someone who's interviewing you. Hey, I watched that new planner recruiting, ask a recruiter, I need at least $60,000. It's not necessarily the case, right? There's a lot more that goes into finding the right fit than just compensation, and you need to certainly look at it from a longer term view. Of course, benefits matter, right? Health insurance, is that included, or is there a stipend, right? CFP materials, is that something that's going to be covered? Are they just going to cover the exam? Are they going to cover the review materials and the exam? Will they cover it if you fail it, right? Perhaps not, right? Those are all important things. Retirement contributions, all of those things kind of go into what the offer looks like, but we still want to touch on what we're seeing within that salary survey. And we are seeing those salaries move up some. I think if most of you pay attention to economics, the inflation data that's coming out, certainly looks like costs are going up across the board. What that's going to do to salaries long-term within the profession, I'm not sure. We have seen that there has been a shortage of candidates. If you've been around the profession for very long at all, you know there's been a conversation for some time about there being a talent shortage. The average age of an advisor is over 50 years old. That's no secret. And there's a shortage of folks kind of younger than that are coming in. I think the pandemic probably exacerbated that, and we're seeing some pent-up demand, and that's probably causing some of that. It's probably causing some of the interest from career changers, right? I think the economics is catching up. So that's just a real quick overview of what we're seeing on the salary side. Does anybody have any questions? All right, Jayla, you want to tackle resumes and what we're seeing on the resume side. Should I just go into Microsoft Word and get one of those really pretty bright blue or pink templates off there and just fill it in with cursive letters? Is that what we're looking for in financial planning?
If you're applying to the skating rink, absolutely. That should do it for you. That should do it for you. So somebody had a question that they asked us if we recommend a one-page resume and some examples of what we kind of consider to be a good resume as well. So I'm happy to kind of dive into that a little bit more. And I'll speak one from my experience, and then two also from the way that we kind of view it in our recruiter eyes as well. So I was always taught the one-page rule of thumb. As I've kind of gained more experience and interacted with more people, as well as people who have like more degrees and stuff than me and have publications and things like that to list, they have some other different rules in ways that they may think of the one-page rule, because one page just simply may not be enough, and I can definitely understand that. Some people will say one page per 5 years, one page per degree, one page for this or that. There's lots of different rules on that. I think one way to really think about it is, if you have probably less than 5 years of experience or so, just keep the relevant experience. And that's the main emphasis of it. Is not that we don't want to see that you worked at Burger King when you were 16, but it's probably not going to transfer too much over into what you're doing now, or be something that the firm owners are looking for if you're running title and space. If that's some of the only experience that you have, of course, leave that on there, because we don't want your resume to be empty. But just kind of prioritizing what you think is probably the most important based on the jobs that you're applying for. And that's something that we encourage as well, is to cater your resume to the opportunities that you're applying for. So if you're applying for a peer planner opportunity and you're applying for, an IT position, you're going to kind of speak and add different things that you may have done, different spotlights of materials or skills that you may have gained during that time based on that opportunity. So just keeping that in mind as well. So in terms of the one-page rule, that's an ideal world that everybody's resume is one page. That's definitely probably what we would encourage, generally speaking. But we do also understand times where it wouldn't be. Like we said, we just want it to be semantically clear. If you're using bullet points, if you're using dashes, if you're using full sentences, cut off sentences, whatever it is, consistency. Also just legibility and readability. I know sometimes when you're working toward that one page, you're like, okay, I'm going to make each font like 8.5, and then it's all really small. So just making sure that the person who's going to be reading it is able to kind of digest that information. In terms of content, one thing, I guess, for our industry specifically that we wanted to encourage and emphasize is that if you're somewhere tracking along the CFP coursework or exam or studying for the exam, just took the exam, whatever the case is, definitely making sure that you have that noted on your resume somewhere clearly and probably at the top as well. So if you have your education and things listed at the top, your licenses, any licenses that you may have that are active, as well as if you're progressing through the CFP coursework or exam process at any point, those are two good things to include. Like I mentioned before, the consistency and formatting, just aesthetically, like Jesse said, we want it to look nice. That may not necessarily be the pink and purple, but it's making sure that it looks clean lines, legible. Probably a header at the top that has your name and contact information is also a key component too, just so that we can look at the resume, okay, name, email address, phone number, we can kind of get what we need from there. But those are the main things. So I would say, generally speaking, yes to the one-page resume. It's not a hard written in stone rule, but it's definitely something we would encourage towards so that you can have the idea of being concise, as well as communicating the points that you need within that time. And then just hitting the primary content that you would need for whatever job it is that you're applying or whatever opportunity it is that you're applying to. So if they're looking for your progress to the CFP coursework, if they're looking for the license that you have, your relevant financial planning experience, all of those types of things. For myself personally, I have two experience categories. So I have my relevant experience and then I have my other experience, which is, like I said, supplemental. They're gonna maybe look at it in a different context, but they want to see what you've been doing. And then as I get more quote unquote relevant experience to jobs or opportunities or things that I may be applying to, then some of that less relevant experience will kind of fall off the bottom. So that's what we encourage for you guys to do as well.
Excellent, excellent. And kind of to piggyback off of that too, one of the things that you need to think about when you're adding the content to your resume is think about not just what your experience is, but why it matters to the firm owner, and frame it that way. Remember, the partners are going to be sitting around the table looking at this resume, and their bonus distributions are going to go down when they hire this person. Why is what experience is on your resume worth them taking less home, right, next year, right? Why is it worth the training? Why is it worth all of those things, right? So it's not just that you worked at the skating rink, it's that you mentored folks and taught them how to learn how to skate, right? Or I manage the money. And this is why that matters. It's something about responsibility. It's something about work ethic. It's something that can be applied and that can make a difference within their firm, right? So think about it that way. Don't make us, either recruiters or firm owners, try to construct the narrative for you. It's your job to do that for us, right? And you don't have very long to do that. We generally joke 30 seconds max is what we're going to spend looking at your resume, more than likely. So you don't have long to make that first impression.
Agreed. And I saw we got a question in the chat as well about graduating from a CFP program. Is it appropriate to put CFP candidate on a resume? In technicality terms, I'm not sure. I've seen it been done multiple times, and I would personally deem it appropriate. I definitely will let Jesse chime in because he's an actual CFP and maybe there's another thought. But I think it's an accurate depiction that once you graduate from the CFP program, you now have the education completed, and that next step is the exam. Sometimes people will also deem that once you take it and pass the exam, that's when your candidacy is more effective. And I could also choose to agree with that. I think what would maybe be an appropriate middle ground is if you finish the CFP education and you're tracking towards studying for the exam, or you're not sure yet, to communicate whatever point you're at from there. So you can say, whatever your degree program was, CFP coursework complete. And then if you have an exam date scheduled or projected or whatever, that's something that you could include to kind of add that additional context to what your next step is from there. But I'll let Jesse chime in on his thoughts.
I echo exactly what Jayla said. So the only issue with using candidate and certificate isn't a matter of correctness. It's, does the person who's looking at your resume know what that means? And it may not be the case. So what I would put is that you completed the CFP coursework or you graduated in May of 2021, expected exam date July 2022, right? You got to make sure that you can actually hold up to when you're going to take that exam, right? And we don't want to lead people astray. We want to be honest. But yeah, I think that's probably a clearer way, because you also need to know that this resume might get filtered through someone who isn't a CFP, who might be an HR, who may be well-intended, but not know exactly what that means. So you want to hedge your bets just a little bit in that regard.
Agreed. So I feel like that's a good segue into what else can you do with the CFP aside from just go and be a financial planner? What options are out there and different tracks for people who are interested in financial planning, but not necessarily sure what the potential is there?
Yeah, so that's a question we get a lot, right? Someone who's frustrated or not sure that they want to go the traditional advisor route, but they still, maybe they want to leave the profession, or they want to know what else they can do within the profession. So if you're here and you're frustrated and you want to leave the profession, I would say stop, don't leave yet, right? Let's talk about this, because there are a lot of cool things you can do in financial planning with the CFP background that doesn't mean being a lead advisor, right? Or being on that path. So as financial planning gets more specialized, right, I think there are going to be more and more opportunities to do different things within financial planning. So it could be something like what Jayla and I do as recruiters. It could be something in education. It could be something in financial literacy. It could be something in government and regulation. It could be something in textbook creation. It could be something in fintech, right? As financial planning softwares get more robust, if technology is something that interests you and you already come at it from an angle where you understand financial planning and have that technical background, then something in fintech could be a great option. Something in sales or distribution of those tools, everything from financial planning software to something at the CFP board and branding for the marks, right? I have friends that went that route where they go work for the CFP board or the FPA, right? Those might be options. There might be options in the insurance world as well, not even necessarily on the sales side, but on the underwriting side. Great example, my younger brother's a graduate of a CFP program, and he underwrites complex medical malpractice insurance, right? For everything from the COVID vaccine to very high risk surgeries, right? Again, it's kind of understanding time value of money and how insurance works. So those might be options. Things in the mutual fund or alternative space might be on the table as well. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with financial planning knowledge if the advisor track isn't for you. You might also think about some sort of director of operations or compliance track. If you like planning, but you don't necessarily love being in front of clients, then as we see more and more large RIAs that are buying smaller RIAs, the opportunity to be a director of financial planning might be on the table for you. So don't give up on financial planning if you like the topic areas, but aren't sure that you want to be a lead advisor or an equity partner in a firm, because there's so many cool things you can do in this profession outside of that. We also get questions all the time about what other relevant designations are there? Should I get a master's degree? Should I get a PhD? So let's tackle a couple of those. So other relevant designations that we see pop up, I would say the most prevalent or the most in demand would be one of the tax designations. So the enrolled agent, which is through the IRS and allows you to give tax advice or prepare tax documents or represent someone in tax court, right? You can kind of think of that. I shouldn't say like a mini CPA, but certainly the tax portions of that. The CPA is another one. I get questions all the time. Should I get the CFA? I would say it depends. If you want to be a portfolio manager, yes. But I wouldn't say that most firms are going to be willing to pay you for the time and investment that it takes to get the CFA, right? CFA, you have to be incredibly intelligent to get the CFA. It is certainly an important designation within our profession, but don't do it unless you're really passionate about the investment management side. That's really where you see yourself going, right? Be mindful of your time in the investment. The SEMA is probably a little quicker track. It's, again, a very relevant designation, but that might be something I would pursue instead of the CFA, again, unless you want to be a portfolio manager. The CHFC, if you're already a CFP, I'm not sure that that's going to give you the ROI that you're looking for, unless your boss tells you otherwise, right? Be careful about accumulating too many designations. They matter, yes, but if you are a CFP, that's what I would recommend you focus on. If you want to be a financial planner in the RIA space, especially, then the CFP is going to be the pinnacle, right? That's what you need to be pursuing, right? Once you get there, then you might find, after 3 or 4 or 5 years of practicing, you might find what area is most interesting to you, then dive into something like the RICP, which would tell you a lot about retirement income planning. You may look at something like the Sudden Money Institute, which might tell you more about how to deal with complex situations and some of the softer skills. Same with life planning and going through the Kinder Institute. Those are the things that I might think about after I've got the CFP. I have this technical side. You might consider something like that. Now, should I get a master's degree? We get that question pretty much once a day, every other day, right? Should I get a master's degree? Chances are probably not, right? If you are a graduate of a CFP program, an undergraduate program, most of the Masters of Financial Planning programs are going to repeat what you've already done. Now, there are some exceptions. The Golden Gate Advanced Financial Planning Master's degree would be an exception to that. I think Kansas State might be kicking off something similar. But a lot of just a Master's in Financial Planning probably isn't going to, again, give you that ROI you're looking for. An MBA, should you get an MBA? I would say, again, chances are probably not. The only exceptions I would say to that are if you want to teach, if you want to, if you move to a new location and you're having a hard time networking, one of the advantages to an MBA is you are paying for somewhat of a network, right? That might help you, right? If you move from, say, Atlanta, Georgia to Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, getting an MBA at North Carolina certainly would give you access to a network. Now, is those tens of thousands of dollars the best way to develop that network? I don't know. But I doubt you're going to get anything technical from the MBA that is going to make you a better financial planner, right? If you want to go the consulting route, that might be different. The MSF, I would say similar, right? And I say that full disclosure, I'm a semester away from getting an MSF, right? So full disclosure, I think there's value in it, but it's very specific value for a very specific set of goals. A master's of tax might help you. Again, if you're really focused in the tax field, that might be something you consider as well. So does that answer your question? I would say a PhD only if you want to do research or seek a tenure track opportunity at a university. Really the only reason to get a PhD. Any questions on designations or master's degrees? I'm not saying if you're here and you have a master's degree, that's in no way to belittle your master's. Again, I'm a semester away from one as well. But do be mindful if you're kind of staring down that road and what the ROI is going to look like, kind of where it might put cash back in your pocket or further your career. Make sure you understand that before you go take on debt or drain your cash.
Definitely. Okay, so rolling right along. If you guys have questions or have developed questions over time, definitely drop those in the chat. We can tackle a few questions live probably at the end as well if we have time for that. So if you're holding on to them, please let us know. But we had a question about career changers or students who are finishing up school. Do we typically see positions that start part-time flexible hours that have the potential to grow to full-time? And this typically for new planner recruiting, we work with full-time positions, so usually entry-level like paraplanner, associate advisor type of roles, and then up through there from that, that continue from there. we don't typically work with like internships or part-time programs. I think what's something that's interesting to note from this is that because of the flexibility of working from home, working remotely, starting some things or having class remotely or having work remotely, I think that there may be an increase in what that may look like as people may start to integrate if they know they're going to go into the role, or if firms know they're going to hire on a lower level advisor, a lower level associate going forward. They may start to integrate that track working backwards of like if we have a spring intern that comes in and they just continue on through the summer into their full-time role. Same thing for career changers or whatever. It's actually a conversation I'm going to be having with one of my clients next week because I've come across someone who's in a predicament like that. And I think that he's someone who could benefit from a track where he could, ramp up that time period with someone who's a student or who still has a little bit of learning to do, and that be kind of like that training period and then continuing on from there. But to answer your question, generally speaking, that's not something that we see, not to say that it's not out there. I think that there definitely are opportunities out there for that. And I've heard of that in other industries as well. But specifically for new planner recruiting, we typically work with full-time opportunities.
Excellent. And we just got a question. Can you explain the decline in pass rate for the CFP exam? And I'm going to semi-punt on this one, Christina. I think it's a fantastic question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm inclined to give you an uphill both ways story about how, the students like me were just tougher back in the day, but I'm not sure that that's the case. I'm inclined to blame it on COVID for the time being. I would imagine that would give folks more time to study. I don't know how taking it virtually impacted that class that did take it at home. I would have to look at the data, and Christina, I'm just not well versed enough on it to know what might be impacting that. It could be, and I'm spitballing just a little bit here to use an unprofessional term, but there's so much interest now, I think, because of the shortage in financial planning as we get more career changers, as more people sit for the exam, the average might move down, right? I think that might be the case. But again, I don't know. I don't want to speak out of turn either.
I think something else to note too in a conversation that I've had with candidates recently and career changers recently is people who are going through the education now or who have gone through the education recently and are planning to take the exam soon. The kind of cutoff of this final exam now and the March 22 exam, that's going to be a little bit different. And studying for that, how the curriculum is changing, how the curriculum is aligning with what's coming up going forward, people really taking interest in the psychology piece of things. And it's kind of that. That's complete speculation, but it's a conversation that I've had with a few candidates of just like, should I rush and try to get the content in now so I can take the last exam, or should I just kind of start to prepare for what the 22 exam will look like? And that's something to think about as well.
Excellent. I think there's a lot to the psychology piece too. I think we'll see how that plays out. It's certainly going to benefit some candidates and perhaps others less. Right. I think for technical folks, it might be a little tougher. And I think for others, it might be easier. So how much does it cost to take the exam? And it depends on when you register. There's usually early bird pricing that saves you somewhere between $100 to $200. I think it's $925 is what it costs to sit for the exam. At least that's what it was last cycle. I would have to double check, but it is a significant investment, right? So I tell folks generally, you have to decide to pass the exam. You don't decide to sit for the exam. So it is a full commitment for 6 months of you studying just about every day to pass the exam. So, when you sit down and you make that, call it $1,000 commitment plus a review course, you're deciding that the next 6 months are dedicated entirely to passing that exam. It's not something that can be tackled half-hearted, even for a CPA or a CFA, right?
Agreed. We had another question about when reaching out to firms, how upfront should you be when asking about opportunities in the firm? And if they should send the resume and cover letter kind of on that first interaction. And this is kind of a twofold question. I want to say that there's no way to be too aggressive, but there definitely is. So I don't want to say that. However, I think that your emphasis and the comfortability that you have to put yourself in front of people kind of depends on your own brand. For people who may not be as comfortable, you might have to challenge yourself a little bit more to send that email just to start that conversation, or send that email to have that lunch call. And then for people who, have never met a stranger, it may not be, sending your resume on the very first meeting, or it may not be, sending them an email every single day until they answer. There's definitely a balance between the two. When you're looking at opportunities, and if you're just trying to kind of put yourself out there or just see what's out there or start conversations, I think that the range of communication is kind of at your fingertips. You're more than welcome to send a quick LinkedIn message. When I don't know people or want to get in contact with people, or want to start a conversation, that's usually my go-to method. I always make the joke that I'm a LinkedIn stalker, one, because I'm a recruiter, but two, because it has everything that you need. If you're looking for connections, or if you're looking for businesses, if you're looking for different interests and stuff like that, it really is a strong platform. That's why we encourage you all to connect with us on there. But also too, if you have their contact information, like an email or a phone number or something like that, then you can use that. I think passing your information along on the first interaction could be fine. But if you have follow-ups and stuff like that, then maybe just following up for the good of the conversation, not necessarily like, hey, here's my updated resume every time. But just kind of playing that by ear. But generally speaking, if you're feeling comfortable with making an engagement with someone, reaching out, hey, I'm just interested in learning more about your firm. Hey, I'm interested in learning more about the opportunity. Or, hey, I'm just interested in learning more about you and yourself. That's sometimes just the beginning of a conversation that can lead to other places. If you're reaching out to someone specifically about an opportunity, like they have a job posting and you're interested in that, I say 100%, hey, quick introduction about myself. I'd be excited to talk to you a little bit more about what this entails, or what the role is, or your company, or whatever little blurb you want to say, and then go ahead and attach your information as well, because then they have a one-stop shop to everything that they need. So when people shoot me an email, hey, I've attached myself, okay, cool, I can go ahead and look at your resume, I can look at the cover letter, I can look at your email, and go ahead and give you a response right then and there, versus if you don't, and I need to get the resume, or if I need to find the resume, or look at the LinkedIn, or whatever it is. So you can definitely streamline in that effect, but don't feel like you have to put your resume in front of every single person that you ever reach out to as well.
Good stuff.
Cool. Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, looking at the phone, we've got about 10 minutes left. So let's open it up to questions. Either we can unmute you or drop something in the chat if you have a question, comment, feedback, disagreement. We're open for any and all of that.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be financial planning industry related. It can be specifically about Jesse or myself. We both have backgrounds in financial planning and have different paths up into this point and different interests going forward. So we're happy to talk more about kind of what that looks like as well, because that can help you contextualize what you're looking for.
We've both been at this long enough. We've heard it all, I think. Do I need my 7 and my 66? It depends on where you want to work, right? If you want to work at a fee-only RIA, you need neither of those, neither of those. Mm-hmm. You would just need the 65, but if you attain the CFP, that will count for the 65 in most states. If you want to go sell insurance, you might not need the 7 or 66. Where you're going to need the 7 and 66 is if you go to, say, a duly registered firm or a hybrid firm, right, where they need something to clear and they give investment advice for a fee, right? So if they sell both securities and give investment advice for a fee, that's where the 7 and the 66 would matter. All depends on where you want to go.
Cool. And I'll tackle the next one. That was how much does previous experience, like internships, matter? So I think that it's a pretty pivotal part of your resume. As I was mentioning before, as you get more experience, full-time experience or relevant experience to the track that you're on, that will kind of subside. But as a new college grad, internships is definitely one of the primary things that we look at. In addition to education and just other experience in organizations and stuff like that. But that internship experience demonstrates a commitment to the industry, for one, and then also just an ability and a skill, any things that you learn within that internship, some exposure. It kind of gets the workings out, because a lot of firm owners that we talk to in thinking about hiring new college grads, they're always having the conversation of, how do I know that they know that this is what they want to do? How do I know that they really want to be in financial planning or whatever that looks like? And sometimes having the CFP education isn't enough, because if you're looking at me, I have the CFP education, but am not making a strong commitment towards the CFP coursework, or not the CFP coursework, the CFP exam or anything like that. Just using myself as an example to kind of preface why that's important. And like I said, the internship is just a showcase of what you learned, what you spent your time doing, but also if you were unable to get an internship or for whatever reason just continued working or whatever the case is, it's not a shun against you, but just to showcase some of your other skills and abilities that you may have learned in other ways if you were unable to get internship experience. Or for someone like myself, we talk a lot about career changers, but we also have a lot of like degree changers within financial planning as well, people who started in another degree program and then midway through realized, yeah, this isn't what I want to do. Again, myself, started out in psychology, realized that I love psychology, but just wasn't sure what I was going to do with that. So made the transition to financial planning and have loved it. And so realizing that obviously I had one semester left, I may have only had time to do one internship, or if I didn't have time to do an internship, or understanding of all of those things. But internships can definitely push you over the edge if you don't have any other relevant experience or any other experience at all. It can definitely be something that sets you apart.
I agree. So the next two questions kind of run together, right? On the MSF 65 CFP, what should I do, right? So if you're an MSF candidate, pre-CFP, does the 65 help? I will again say that the CFP is probably paramount. Getting started on the coursework is going to get you where you want to go quickest. However, I imagine you just paid for the MSF. That's pretty expensive. If you can't afford to tackle the CFP right now, then yes, the 65 is probably the next best thing. I would combine that with getting some kind of financial planning software exposure. If you can do the FPA externship next summer, if you don't find something between now and then, that might be a quick way to get some of that exposure. And someone else said, wouldn't you agree that if someone is a career changer and already has an undergrad degree, that a certificate program is the way to go for the CFP? Generally, yes. There are times where a master's might make more sense, depending on what you're looking for. If you're looking, depending on kind of where you are financially, what you're looking to get out of the program. If you're just looking to get the CFP quickest, again, a certificate program is there. If you are wanting to make a change and you think you might want to teach someday, if there's a certain area you really want to dive in, or you learn best in person, then you might have to think about a master's. But yes, generally the certificate program is going to be the quickest way to go.
And I can tackle the next one about how we feel about sales internships, or which way is the way to go on experience. We completely understand that there are so many different ways to do financial planning, and there's so many different models and fee structures and experience that you may gain from that. And we take all of that into account. Generally speaking, those internships are ones that we consider to still be a value. Any internship is an internship. It's a demonstration that you went out and you did the work in the application process to get an opportunity to forward your career, regardless of if it's in financial planning or not. That's the first step. And then it being in financial planning is an even greater step in commitment to the industry, like I was mentioning before. But like I said, acknowledging that there's so many different ways to do planning, and you may decide from one way or another that you may be going into a place that's more focused on, one thing or another, or comprehensive planning as a whole. The only thing that I'll say, I guess, past that is for firms who are doing comprehensive financial planning, it's not that they won't value that experience, but sometimes they're looking for like specific, something that looks basically copy and paste like what they're doing. So if they're a small fee-only RIA firm, they may be looking for someone who has that small fee-only RIA firm experience. Not exclusively, but just something that they may attach to a little bit more in terms of looking at candidates. So that's something to consider if you're like, oh yeah, I have tons of experience at a broker-dealer and I'm applying for a fee-only opportunity and they're not really taking me seriously, or they're not looking in my direction, which shouldn't be the case, like I said. But it's just something to think about, that there may be that thought process of the ways that they do planning and the extent they do planning to, and the focuses and stuff within that. But generally speaking, I would say, yes, that experience is still valuable. And Jesse, are you typing in the software?
Yes.
Okay, cool. While you're doing that, I'm going to tackle one last question that I thought was just a good one to kind of overarching and a theme to kind of think about. And it's And if you have other questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. We can handle those. But the question was, what are top things to consider in evaluating what firm and opportunity would be a good fit? And this is just something, like I said, going into it, you want to know what you're looking for, but even past that, as you begin to interview, you want to imagine, not only am I able to do the opportunity, but do I kind of fit into the team and what they have going on, the way that they do things, the way that their team is structured, the growth tracks that they have, the expectations that they're going to have for someone coming into this role. Is it something that you can see yourself fitting into past that? Also, is there an opportunity for mentorship? I think that's something, as a new college grad or as someone who's new to any industry, can be very, very valuable. Mentorship at any age is very, very valuable, but especially coming into a new industry and kind of taking that next step in your career, that's something that I encourage people to look for, because it can make that transition a little bit easier. But it can also help you connect with the higher ups and for them to understand maybe areas that you're struggling in or areas that you're doing well in, and to help coach you through those as well. So those are things that I like to tell people to think about. As Jesse mentioned before, compensation is much more than just they're going to pay you X amount of money, but the benefits and other things that they're working into that. A lot of our firms, majority of our firms, I'll say, will have some sort of continuing education benefit. That's something that we encourage, because we understand the required continued education that is needed to be a financial planner. Things are constantly changing. Laws are constantly changing. You get different clients all the time. So we understand that you're going to continue to need to learn over that time. So we encourage our firms to participate and encourage that for the people that are working there as well. And for people who may be pursuing the CFP education or pursuing the CFP designation or wanting to get licensed, if that's an ability of the firm. So just different things like that. And looking at the opportunity, like I said, not just the opportunity itself, the other benefits and compensation, how you fit into the team now, but also long term, and then just kind of making a pretty holistic decision based on that. So just wanted to put that bug in your ear. Sometimes you're like, oh, this is the perfect job. It's exactly what I was looking for. But past what's on paper, it may not be a great fit. So just having that in mind too.
Agreed. So we've got a couple of minutes left. We're right here at the hour. Does anyone have any closing questions? When should I plan to take the CFP exam after graduation? So shameless plug, we wrote an article that was posted on Kits's blog where we kind of tackled some of those questions. What I would say, I would generally take it sooner rather than later. And this is the reason you should really engage in the coursework. Don't just memorize things to pass an exam in your undergraduate or certificate program, right? You need to really engage with this stuff. If you graduate in May, I would plan to take it in November or March of the following year. You don't want the tax code to change too much on you. I think that's one of the best reasons, and you're in study mode. Maybe July, I think that's a tight turnaround, because you need to go through you really need to go through a review course. So if you graduate in May, again, I think November or March, just stay focused. And plus, if you move to a new city and you don't have any friends, then you don't have any excuses not to study. And so, Jayla, you tackled the one about where are the best places to find out about an office culture for an RIA. That's a good question.
So I guess clarification question, what do you mean by that? So when you're going through an interview process, how to find out about the culture and learn more about that? Find a good fit. Oh, yes. So typically speaking, when our firms have their interview process, they'll have an in-office visit. Usually they'll have some sort of like team meeting or visit, as well as an in-office visit. And I think that those are often good times. For some of our upper level opportunities, they may go to dinner, they may go to lunch, or they may sit outside and talk. I think COVID has also required us to be more creative in the way that we meet with people. Everybody doesn't want to come in and meet inside, or they don't want to meet in close quarters. So people have gone, out to lunch or to a park or to a picnic or things like that. But I think that honestly, the best way to get a fit for a feel and culture is to ask the questions past what the opportunity entails. So those questions that I was mentioning before about how the firm owners or the other people within the firm, how they got into financial planning, or how they ended up at the company that you're interviewing with, or how they started the company that you're interviewing with, depending on who you're talking to. And just getting a better feel of how they are. And you can talk about, what other things do you like to do outside of work? How's the work-life balance? I think that's a pretty common question that people will ask as well. And then too, I always have like a mental checklist of a few things that are like no deal breaker things for me. So things that I walk into a room and I'm like, okay, if it doesn't have this, this, and this, I'm very checklist. So I'm like, if it doesn't have this, this, and this, and I can't do it. It's like when you're on House Hunters. I'm like, the house doesn't have a big tub, I can't get this one. Oh, the house doesn't have this, I can't get that one. And not to say to be that selective with jobs, but it's definitely important to realize if someone's wanting you to come in, and for example, this is just the common thing that we see, if someone's wanting you to come in and from day one, do business development, and you're like, yeah, I'm not comfortable with that, or I'm really, into myself, or I'm not comfortable speaking with other people yet, or I don't know how big my network is, or like Jessica said, you're moving to a new city and you're maybe doing business development, thinking of things like that and how that may or may not be a fit, or even for career changers as well, if you're making a transition into a role and it's going to be a role where you're working, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., if that's not conducive to the family life that you may be working with, things like that as well. So just having some of those other things that are important to you that you're going to continue to maintain at a work that you want to translate into that, as well as what the culture that's already created and established, if that's something that you can see yourself aligning with as well. And usually, even if you're having formal interview conversation, you can get a decent feel for how they are. Like one of my clients up in New York, he's hilarious. I tell people that all the time, he's hilarious. So when people ask, oh, what's the firm like? What's the culture like? Oh, they have a lot of fun, they laugh, they get their work done, but it's ultimately about having a good time serving their clients. So that's something I'm able to translate over to that because we have those interactions.
Excellent. So I know we're a couple of minutes over, which we are happy to stick around and answer any questions. Again, another reason to connect with us on LinkedIn. Reach out to us if you have additional questions. Does anyone have anything else before we close this thing out? All right. Well, thank you all for coming and spending an hour of your Friday afternoon with us. Again, I hope everyone has an exciting weekend planned. Thank you so much for your time. We know how valuable it is. Let us know if we can be a resource to you in any way at all. And take care. Have a wonderful fall.